What's up, everybody? My name is Tim Roswick, and after playing almost 100 Game Jam games, I have a subject that I want to talk about, and that's the subject of feedback. But not the kind of feedback that you might give someone on their game or they might give you. I'm talking about the kind of feedback that communicates with the player itself. It's the communication between the game and the player. And this is something that I see a lot in Game Jam games because a lot of people run out of time, but also because a lot of people are newer in making their games. We have a lot of people that start their first game on a Game Jam or things like that. So polish and feedback to the player are usually some of the first things to miss, especially when it comes down to time constraints, right? Like you meant to polish later, but you ran out of time, or just not understanding what it takes to make something that feels good. So we're going to talk about specifically combat for games and how you can add a few things to your combat to make it feel a little bit better. So first up, I want to say that there are two distinct types of combat feedback, I think, personally. And I think it kind of boils down. There are a lot of other types, but specifically for combat and hit detection, there are two types. One is from the enemy to the player, and one is from the player to the enemy. So from the enemy to the player, when an enemy shoots the player or damages them in any way, there needs to be some kind of indication from the player that the player got hurt. And this can be a range of things. The player can flash white. The player can blink. You can put a red screen over the top of the layout. You could just flash a red opaque screen. Opacity, mess with it depending on your game, but just flashing red can kind of help with that thing. If you have a health bar, you can make it flash, right? Something that draws the attention of the player so that they understand that they got hit. Because here's the thing. A lot of people, they'll put in a health bar, or they'll put in a health percentage, and they'll go on and they'll push their game out, and they'll realize that players don't notice they got hit because there's no indication that they got hit other than the health going down. But the problem is when you're in combat, when you're fighting something, when you're shooting something, you're not paying attention to the health bar. You're paying attention to the enemy or the direction that you're shooting or your controls or whatever it is. So you're not looking anywhere. If you can find a way to communicate to the player what's going on, you're good. The best way, I think, to do it is a combination of all these things that we talked about. Flashing red, health bar bumps a little bit. The player changes color real quick. The more you do, the better and more juicy it feels. The player is a really good one. Changing the color of the player, flashing white, flashing red, flashing in and out. There are a lot of different ways to do it. It depends on your game. But that's a good one because usually the focus is on the player, right? You're usually looking at the player. But the screen is really good because they're definitely looking on the screen somewhere. Health bar can be less effective because they're probably not looking up at the health bar, right? Make sure that you have sounds in there for hit impact. You definitely need sounds when an enemy makes a connection and a hit to the player. If the player gets hit, you need to know. A lot of games do this with like the sounds, like that kind of thing. But you can also do like a bassy bullet. It really depends on the game and the style that you're going for. And then on the flip side, there's the feedback that you actually want to give the player on whether or not they hit the enemy, right? So you want to let them know when they're getting hit, and usually that overrides the feedback that you give them when they're making hits. Because losing health is more important in a game than inflicting damage. Because health can kill you, inflicting damage necessarily won't. So always make sure that overrides. Now, on the flip side, when you're actually hitting an enemy, when you're shooting an enemy, a lot of the same things apply. I wouldn't flash the screen, but if the enemy has a health bar and the health goes down, that's a nice touch. If the enemy flashes white or flashes red or flashes at all, or has a hit animation, right? Maybe they have a hit frame or a hit animation that they kind of go to. Those are all really nice touches. And you'll notice if you have a big gun and you shoot somebody and they flash white and they knock back and they stop their animation, what they're doing, and then they resume and go, that feels so much better than just a nonstop enemy that you just shoot and they don't react to it at all. Remember, they're getting shot by a bullet. You should react a little bit more than just, keep walking at the player. So that kind of reaction really helps. And then in addition to that, one of the things that I like to do, which has helped a lot, is when you are shooting at an enemy, I like to flash frames every time they actually get hit. So I like to give some kind of visual feedback to the player. I like to make a sound at the same time, but then at every damage interval or whatever it is, whether it's one hit or whether it's multiple hits or something, have them kind of stutter back. And so it's kind of a mix of everything together. Have them kind of stutter back, stop their animation, maybe going to a different mode, right? Like if an enemy is patrolling back and forth and they get shot, maybe have them go into a follow the player mode, right? And then if they get shot a few more times and it doesn't die, then pause for a second, stagger back, and then continue, resume doing whatever they were doing. Little things like that can make a big difference in the feedback. Just that stuff on the player and on the enemies, just adding that kind of thing can make a huge difference. If you do nothing else, that alone will make a big difference. Now, in addition to that, one of the things that I've learned about bullets is that bullets almost always can be bigger. No matter what game you do, whether it's a platformer or top-down or whatever. Obviously, this doesn't apply to like realistic military shooters and that kind of thing. But I'm talking more in terms of like 2D games, top-down platformers. Almost always, you want to over-exaggerate the bullets. It makes it easier to shoot. It makes it easier to avoid bullets. It makes it easier to see. And I think it just makes the game more fun, right? More bullets that are bigger, I think, makes the game more fun. And there is a really good video that you should watch by Vlambeer. I'll link it down below, but it basically goes through a bunch of different ways to juice up your game. I highly recommend you watch that because there are dozens of more tips than I can give you here, and it actually illustrates it on video rather than just watch someone talk, which is beneficial with this kind of thing. So I recommend you watch that. But those are just some quick tips that I have for types of games that I make: 2D games, platformers, top down, that kind of thing, with combat mechanics specifically, how to juice up combat. So I recommend you watch that video next because that'll give you more details. And then if this was helpful, let me know. Hit me a thumbs up. Leave me a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts. I would love to know if this was helpful. Would you like to see more stuff like this? Is it not really helpful having me talk about it, not show? Or would you prefer me to show? Or how does it work? Let me know your thoughts. Once again, my name is Tim Moswick, and I will see you again tomorrow.